Baumberger, and I didn't drop out of Duke. I actually graduated from Duke, but it was probably before you guys were all born. So I graduated from Fuqua, and I did my undergraduate at William and Mary. But once I got to Fuqua, I realized that I really wanted to be an entrepreneur, and so I did a stint in the corporate world first because I had all this student loans to pay off. I'm sure you guys can appreciate this. So I worked for a small marketing company in Atlanta. It's called Coca-Cola, and I was there for 10 years, traveled around the world and got to learn a lot. But they started to slow down their innovation, and that's when I knew it was time to leave. And since then, I have been part of 5 different startups. 3 of them wildly successful, 1 broke even, and 1 was a disaster. So that's what it means to be an entrepreneur. Anybody that tells you that they batted 1,000, they're lying, okay? Now, history always allows you to make things look better than they were, but if anybody tells you that, check the facts. I'm pretty sure that that's not the case. So I wrote 2 books. One was on the automotive industry, and then the second one is called Innovation Navigation, and this is something that is really a framework to help all innovators structure the messiness of innovation. There's a lot of questions, there's a lot of information, and it's very hard to figure out what exactly you're supposed to be doing. And so you come to sessions like these, and you come to others, and chances are you're going to walk away confused, frustrated, and searching for more answers. Well, I'd like to say all the answers are in this book, but they're not. It's a process that you can go through to try to put some structure around your thoughts, and then you keep going back out to the marketplace for more and more information. And that's what we're going to talk about here tonight. So one of the things I wanted to share with you all is one of the core things about what's in the book. And if you wouldn't mind passing those around there and passing those around here. So what we're going to do tonight is when Tatiana gets here, we'll introduce her, but I wanted to take you quickly through the framework and explain this to you, and then go through 3 different prototyping methodologies that you can use. And we're actually going to break out into small groups. Don't get scared, don't get frightened, there's no grades, there's no pressure, but it's just to practice this, because the thing about being an entrepreneur is it's a contact sport. It's not some theoretical thing, it's about building something. And so we're going to do that tonight. Then we're going to ask somebody to give us a little feedback on how the process actually went. And then we're going to talk to Tatiana and Jake about how their experiences fit into this iterative prototyping process. So the thing that was just handed out is the framework. And there's the book. If you want to buy it, you can buy it. But the framework is set up so that you're reducing risk each step of the way. Now, one thing you might notice is the top of the frame has more boxes than another. Why do you think that might be?
It's harder to get the ball rolling.
It's harder to get the ball rolling. What else?
It's very hard to take some broad idea and turn it into a very specific, tangible concept that you can actually turn into a product.
That's part of it. Good. Anybody else?
If there isn't a market need, it doesn't matter how good your product or your execution is. And the concept risk seems to be testing whether there's really a market need.
And you win the book. So, you're welcome. Right, so you got to spend a lot of time figuring out what is it that people want. And that's what the whole focus of the top is. Because if you don't have something people want, then what's the point of building something? And you sure as heck aren't going to get to the bottom part, which is, can you execute and make any money on it? Or change the world and make it a better place? You don't have the top done correctly, you're done. You're dead in the water, forget about it. So those are the things that you need to do. Now, what I would encourage all of you to do is to focus on what are the stresses of the problem, the people that you're targeting. What are the pains that they have? Because people buy and they change behavior when they're in pain. There's a lot of people that know that they should go on diets. It would be better for them. But how many people aren't on diets or can't stay on diets? They know it's better for them, but they don't buy until they're in pain. So if the pain is, well, you just had a heart attack, then guess what? All of a sudden, they go on a diet. Well, why didn't you do that for the 10 previous years when you knew you were at risk? People don't buy unless there's pain. So you have to really understand what your pain is before you can come up with even what the idea is that is going to create value for them. So in the book, it kind of takes you through step by step, and it really is more of a workbook than a textbook. Because someone asked me once, how long did it take me to write the book? And I said, only 30 years. So this is what I learned over 30 years of doing this and failing a lot, is to try to give you guys a roadmap of how not to fail. And so concept risk is the thing that you have to be most concerned about. But tonight we're going to talk about product risk. So this assumes that you have something that works. So with both Jake and Tatiana, they already went through the first things, and they know that they have something that's valuable. And just in Jake's description, I always get goosebumps every time I hear it, because I think, wow, think about all those kids who have ADD or ADHD, who can not be on meds, who can change their life, who can really train their brain to perform. That's awesome. So that's a huge value proposition. Getting it to a product that you can actually sell, well, that's a whole nother challenge. So that's what the framework does, and that's why I wanted to share it with you all tonight. Now, there's 3 types of prototyping that we're going to talk about and that you guys are actually going to practice. So the first one is called the mechanical prototype. The mechanical prototyping is probably what you would guess it to be. Anybody got a guess? Anybody?
Building it.
Building it out of what?
Hardware.
Hardware? It's really building it out of whatever you have. Whatever's lying around. Because you're not building something that you're going to sell. You're building something so that you learn about what it is that you're building. So even if it's taking Legos and putting it together, or taking pipe cleaners and wiring things together, it's the act of going in and physically manipulating things to turn it into a prototype that will show you where things will be easy and where things will be difficult. So you actually have to roll up your sleeves and go build something, and take whatever you've got and build the best thing that you can do. So one of the things that works well, and we'll do this tonight, is we're only going to have 5 minutes to go build something. Because when you're working as a team, you don't want to be evaluative with everybody's ideas. You just want to watch what they're building and then say, oh, if we did this, we could add that on. Or if we did this, we could streamline that. And so it's all about the process of collaborating in real time. So that's what the mechanical prototyping is. Does anybody have any questions about that? Yes?
Do you see digital prototyping, building models in the computer, as sort of as being a as short-circuiting that methodology?
You're actually a good plant, because we're going to do digital prototyping. So thank you for asking that question. But the second technique that we're going to look at is illustrative prototyping. So who can guess what that is? drawings. What kind of drawings?
Sketches of the design of your product.
Okay. What else?
Storyboarding how someone would use it.
Storyboarding how someone could use it. Exactly. Anybody else? Instructions? Yeah. So if you think about what the product is, each one of those is very different in how you would illustrate something. Some might be illustrating what it is, the actual thing. The other one is how do you interact with that, and what are the touch points and the way in which you're interacting with it. And then the third one is, and how do you go from a process perspective, step by step through the instructions. So these techniques, there's no right or wrong. It's just grab a pen, grab a marker, and draw. Just do it. Because again, the power is in the action of going through the process. So it's all about drawing whatever you needed to then figure out, okay, what am I missing? All right? So the last one is digital prototyping. And my plant asked the great question. So on digital prototyping, what we did somewhere around here, we brought some Post-it notes. And digital prototyping is great because the Post-it note happens to fit almost exactly in the screen of my iPhone. So it's a great way for you to say, okay, what does the app look like on the home page? What's the next one? What's the next one? And how do we proceed? How are these things linked together? What do they have to go do? But it also forces you, because of the size constraint, to go ahead and map that out. Now obviously you can change that and modify it for a full screen on a computer, a tablet, whatever, but the decisions that you have to make from a design perspective are considerably different when that's all the space you have to use. So it forces you to go figure out, what do I need to focus on and how do I make this process efficient? So that is the digital prototyping option. Now, Kevin, I missed what people are interested in, but do you think we have a candidate in the crowd for a mechanical prototype? Did anyone mention anything that they
No.
wanted to physically
So,
build?
I know we have digital, we have the
Shrimp tank.
shrimp tank. Is it a tank?
Oh, yeah.
You had some, yeah, so we have one in the back.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So what we're going to do is we'll hand out.
They're all one.
They're all one? Okay. It's all in the can.
What would you like to hand it? I can help it.
Well, as long as everybody has one packet, that's fine. Hey, good, how are you? All right, so Mr. Shrimp Tank, why don't you come on down here, and anybody that wants to work on the shrimp tank over here. What was the next one, Kevin? What was the digital
We
one?
have at least one or two digital ones.
Okay, who had a digital one? You're getting free stuff, free help. You got a digital idea? Okay. So you're greenhouse system for 30 installation.
It's so funny.
You grow shrimp at very high rates. You feed the nitrogen source to feed source into the tank.
Planning travel is hands out like you guys are doing.
Should we draw?
Well,
We should draw. I don't understand if it's by the interface, or we should draw like
let your leader explain.
Right, start making like tubes out of these.
We'll build 3 race laser tanks, and then we'll need pumps to connect them.
And then the central filtration unit you said for the nitrogen levels.
Yeah. So that'll be 2 separate tanks that will go from something.
If there's a reservation section, if there's a whatever there is, that's all different pieces. So the idea is to just start drawing, stick it up on the wall, and then put it all back together at the end.
Can I have those Post-its?
You showed us.
Or are we drawing on this?
Are we drawing on
You're drawing on that.
Drawing on
Oh,
this.
you're drawing on
Who else
that.
wants to draw?
So anybody can draw anything. You can actually have 5 people drawing at the same time. Okay, let's start with the trip of your dreams over here in the illustrative one.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming here to talk about our, what's the name of the, your dream experience.com.
Okay, so right now you're looking at a a preliminary model for a shrimp facility that will grow shrimp continuously. So what we have here, it's kind of hard to see underneath, is a tank that holds self-sustaining algae and brine shrimp that are used to feed the shrimp themselves. And then right here you'll see is a vat that houses the shrimp.
But aren't looking to join a gym or pay those big fees. So we each sort of just worked on our own, developing what we would imagine the screen to look like, and then we ended up having a few different types of screens developed that I'm going to show you. So the first is the login page, and how we imagined that was the company logo, and just a really sleek design that includes like your like username, or whether you want to link to Facebook, and some like central claim that the company's making, whether it's a motto or something like that. Then once you log in, it'll bring you to the home screen. And so at our home screen, there's some like fitness picture, get you in the mindset of being fit. And then there's a calendar of the events going, or the classes going on near you this day.
All right, so the people that were the team leads, I have one question for you. It's a yes or no answer. Did you find this exercise gave you different and more ideas than what you initially had?
I'm trying to get... Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
okay,
Yes, absolutely.
all right. I'm glad you all said that. Sometimes people say, no, I already knew all that. And if they say that, then they're lying. Because, again, this is the whole idea of making prototyping a contact sport. When you actually are physically doing it and you are building out the shrimp tank here, you know, I like the idea of, yeah, you can add another tank and another tank, so it's a modular thing. I don't know if that was part of your original idea, but I thought, wow, that's pretty cool. But it's only when you really start to make these things do you realize what you're doing. Here, they had a lot of questions about, well, where do we start? How do you start the whole thing? Is it where you want to go? Is it how much money you have? How much time you have? I don't know. I don't know what's the right place to start. There's a lot of questions that came up there. And then here in the digital group, you know, what's the most important thing to start off with? Because if you don't capture their attention in the first couple of screens, you'll never get to the 5th and 6th screen. So did I have my value proposition clearly spelled out right up front? And so here's the logo and here's what we stand for. So when you get in and you log in, you know that it's certified, qualified instructors for you. You know, whatever the tagline is. But that's something that reinforces the value proposition. But it's only when you start doing this that you realize all the different iterations. So once you build your prototype, what do? What's the next step?
Rebuild.
Test it.
Rebuild? And how do you test it?
With users.
With users. And what's the question that you ask? Will you buy it?
Is it working?
Is it working?
How can it be improved? How much will you pay for this?
How much will you pay for this?
Does it give you value?
Does it give you value? It's really what's wrong with it. What you really want to do is find out what's wrong with it. Because if they tell you what's wrong with it, that's when you're going to have a quantum leap in your understanding. They may say, oh yeah, it's fine, it's good, it works. Yeah, I might buy it, I might not buy it. Yeah, it depends on what the price is. But what you really want to do is find out what's wrong with it. And once you find out what's wrong with it, you'll make a quantum leap And then you'll go back and rebuild it. And then you go back out again and ask what's wrong with it. And you make another quantum leap. And at a certain point, there'll be a diminishing return. And that's when you can stop. Because that's when you have something that you can try to go sell. But you have to make those quantum leaps by going through this iterative prototyping process. And no one is better suited to talk about that iterative prototyping process than our two guests, Jake and Tatiana, who have done it and have figured out that there's a lot of things you got to ask yourself when you're doing it. So, guys, why don't you come up? Tatiana, I think I had you up here. I'm sure there's a better way to display that.
No, I think that's perfect.
That's all you're going to get.
Yeah, that's what I need. Hey guys, my name is Tatiana Birgisson. Good to see you. I'm the founder and CEO of Monte Energy. We're the first truly healthy, long-lasting energy drink. We're a bestseller at Whole Foods across the southeastern US. It's basically an actually good-for-you Red Bull. The ingredients are tea and juices. No sugar added, nothing artificial, nothing fake. We started out by pitching to Duke. I'm a class of 2012, in glass bottles with plantable, biodegradable labels that had seeds infused in them. So you pull the label off, you can plant it, and flowers come from it 2 months later. Really great idea. I pitched to Duke for a summer innovation program grant, essentially what Melissa and Doug is today, $5,000, spend the summer working on your idea. One of the judges there asked me, sometimes you gotta ask yourself if the customer's gonna give a fuck. Like literally, that's what he asked me. And I realized, you know, I don't think customers are gonna give up if, you know, the 20th time they're buying this product, they have to take off the label and plant it. You know, maybe that's kind of gimmicky. Besides that, filling by hand was very expensive. It wasn't something that was practical to do in my dorm room on Central Campus. So I transitioned from bottles, hand-filled, that President Broad had drank, to kegs, like beer kegs that I could sell to offices. It was something that I could afford to do, something where I could test prototyping, I could test different recipes, I could test customers' preferences. About 3 months in, we found that the Red Bull consumption in these offices had decreased by 50%. Tea consumption hadn't changed at all. So I mentioned the product has tea in it. People weren't drinking it because it was a tea product. They were drinking it because they wanted an energy drink that was good for them. So I went back to them. I had a carbonated and a non-carbonated keg version that I tested with these customers, and I asked them 5 questions. You really can't ask customers more than 5 questions unless you're paying them. I couldn't pay them. So the last question I asked them was, how many times a week would you drink this product? The 4th question was, which one do you like the most? On the 4th question, which one do you like the most, carbonated versus non-carbonated, for all statistical purposes, it was exactly the same. But it turns out that when I asked how often you would drink it, they said 4 times more often they would drink the carbonated version. And as a startup, that to me meant, okay, I have no choice but to go the carbonated route because I need volume to be able to get this product anywhere. Carbonation is a challenging manufacturing process on a small scale. It takes time, it takes different kinds of equipment, but it was worth that hassle to be able to get the consumer endorsement that I needed. So with that, I came back to Duke. This was still when I was a student. I applied for the Duke Startup Challenge. I won their Best Undergraduate Startup and got $11,000 to start getting cans made. With the cans, I was able to approach Whole Foods and get on their shelves 6 months later. If we can, once we get the picture up, the second picture on the right, after the glass bottle, the first silver can there, that one, that was my first prototype. That's something that hit the shelves of Whole Foods in February of 2014. As you can see, those of you in the background, you probably can't really see it very well. It's not really noticeable, partly because it's on a white background, but also it just doesn't stand out. So I tried to make a change with that. I tried to make the product name, Monte, the brand, stand out a bit more. So the letters became darker, they became more crisp, so it was redesigned. A couple months later, I found that still wasn't enough. It wasn't popping off the shelf. When I was walking by the list of products, all of the products at Whole Foods, I needed something that would stand out and be the first thing that I saw when I was walking down the aisle. Of course, you'll notice your own product first, but I had my boyfriend Jake from Duke come and help me, and we'd walk down the aisle and we'd grab the cans that first came to mind as we walked by. That's really important with a consumer product where you don't have marketing dollars. It has to get itself in the hands of the consumers until you have the marketing dollars to where that isn't necessary. So we transitioned. The reason there's silver cans is actually because you have to print out 200,000 cans to get them to look like this, where it's actually printed on the aluminum. Whereas if I just bought the silver cans, I could get 5,000 labels printed, and sure, I was applying them by hand, but at least I could test out in 5,000 can batches.
Printing them out at Kinko's and sticking them on by hand.
Yeah, so the
Every
first
single one of them.
the first step of those, the very first silver can, the first two truly silver cans, those were printed out at the FedEx on 9th Street on like 6 labels per sheet in color. Really expensive. Had 2 different labels I had to like squeegee out the air bubbles out of. It took a massive amount of time, but when you're a startup, you do whatever you have to get to the next stage. So the next stage was I had a crank labeler that I could crank out, and I could do 5,000 printed labels at a time, so I didn't have to go to Kinko's anymore. Then the following step was getting darker cans so that it wouldn't look so immature, so new, so startup-y.
Explain that so the middle ones, it's stuck on a silver can still. Might not be.
Yeah, you can't really tell, but it's still a label on those dark gray cans, the shorter kind of soda style cans. And it wasn't until we got into these are called sleek, like the Red Bull Monster style cans, that we actually got printed cans. And that was just, we'd gone through several iterations. We tested out product. I'd labeled over 50,000 cans by hand myself. We'd had over 150,000 cans labeled either by me or by somebody else to get to that point, and we felt confident that we weren't going to make any more prototyping changes to this can for a while, but we do have other flavors. So you'll see on the bottom shelf we have the cherry with a silver background can. That was our second flavor. The shelf hasn't been filled out with the iteration since then, but we also have tropical that's come onto the market over the summer. And those 2 flavors are still in kind of the short cans, and it's for the same reason. We're still making, what I've talked about so far are changes that I've made to the cosmetic of the product, the look, the brand, how it feels. I didn't mention anything about the fact that the actual ingredients and the recipe of the product also changed with almost every iteration up until we got to the darker cans in the background. And that's because you need to be able to make changes pretty quickly to test consumer behavior, test consumer preferences, and see what people like so you can get them what they want.
But it was fun taste testing all of them.
And the batches were the same for the first several years.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and then I would come back every couple of months and Tatiana would say, hey, try this, tell me what you think.
I'd have customers come back and say, I want March 27th batch. Get me more of that one. Turns out that one was slightly different by a matter of 2 or 3 percentage points. Nothing that you would ever be able to see on the ingredients list or on the nutrition facts panel, but things that are almost imperceptibly different unless you drink a lot of the product. And that really helped us to figure out what our consumers liked, what they didn't, so that we had at least a base to work off of for other flavors, for cherry, for tropical, future products. Jake, do you want to tell them your story, and then we can open it up for questions?
So it's clearly a labor of love. I mean, you think about this and you think about all the stories that you hear,
Why don't you pass
but there's the basis of Steve Jobs really was in the garage with Woz. They really were doing things all by hand. And Tatiana and Jake were, Tatiana was the lead labeler, but Jake was helping out. And
I did a lot of labeling.
I know.
Several thousand
So
labels.
you think that
I'm
this
giving
is
you
actually
props.
like just in here, like really sketchy looking prototype? This is what every iteration starts out looking like. Literally, you, the founder, are tearing apart the cardboard and trying to figure out, well, I don't have glue, so how am I going to get this thing to stick together?
There's a lot of prototypes that are not on there. So the first one is jugs, like milk jugs full of tea.
Yeah.
That's the original Monte, is milk jugs full of tea that she would hand out to friends. the kegs are obviously not on there, so you would have these blank, like used, scratched up metal kegs that she
From the
delivered to
70s
offices.
and 80s when Coke and Pepsi sold the concentrate in kegs.
Yeah, and then she would kind of tape a sticker to the kegs when she put it in a customer's office, like that just said Monte on it.
Super sketchy. I
And
don't
people
know
would
why
have to hook
anybody
up a
drank it.
hose and like squirt it out into their cup that she provided. So and then in cans, she had blank cans when we were testing. So these labeled cans, you know, they only became labeled for a while. They were just blank. I drank a lot of cans that were unlabeled blank cans.
You can't sell blank cans,
Yes.
by the way. Those were just for personal consumption.
I'm gonna go into your email. I sent you an email. Hopefully it shows up. Do you have a different email account?
We didn't bring it up, Tatiana.
Blame Jake.
Okay.
Um,
It was the pouty lip that sold
Kurt, those were supposed to be for Q&A.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay. Prototyping. Next time we do this.
Can you try the other? Do you have a different email? I think I sent you an email to a different email with our pictures.
Could be.
So we are very different than Tati's consumer product company. Obviously, we mostly until recently were entirely software-based company. We worked with off-the-shelf hardware from other suppliers that actually made the headsets, but we didn't do anything with headsets. So we just made software. And the company started, as I said, we were doing neuromarketing, so we were testing advertising with brain scans. And what happened was we would meet with people, customers, executives at Disney and Toyota and companies like that, and we would give them a presentation, we'd show them what we could do for advertising, and they would say, that's really cool, but my son has ADHD, or my niece has ADHD, and how do I help them? This looks like it could help them. It was completely irrelevant to our business, but people kept saying that, and when your customers keep telling you to do something, it's a good idea to start listening. So. As you can see here, as a side project, we said, well, maybe we can do something. There's good research on using this technology to help kids with ADHD. Maybe we can be a part of that. And so we mock up within about 3 weeks of really deciding to pursue this brain wing, which is what you see here. This little glider, this red glider figure that you can kind of see in the left-hand side. This character would go up and down across the screen, and the background would slide and loop, and it was really bad because it didn't loop properly, so it'd be like big like jumps in the background. But that little glider would go across and go up and down the more you're focused. So we had a concept, proof of concept, where you could wear a headset, you could focus on your glider, and he would go up as you focused and down. And this product was, you know, the beginning of what became NeuroPlus, and it was really, really horrendous looking. Our engineer is the best designer. And then that product was good enough, though, to get us a meeting with investors and to show investors the concept. And then it went on to iteration number 2. So we got a designer that worked at an advertising agency that was really passionate about the project to help us out. You know, you take a lot of free work when you're starting off. And, you know, he said, my son has ADHD. I want this to exist, so I'm going to make some designs for you. And so he made us like half of one design and then got really busy. And so we kind of just we hired an intern from the Art Institute to try to mock up some other stuff. So this is what became kind of the first iteration of NeuroPlus that really worked the way we thought. You see the glider's been advanced a bit. We actually have a cool little meter of your focus level, goes up and down and fills the NeuroPlus box. You have a score. You have a mountain that repeats every 5 seconds in the background, the same mountain over and over again. But this was good enough to raise our first round of investment. We raised VC capital with this product, and now we can go and see what the current iteration looks like. And this is going to be redone too, but obviously it's changed a good bit. Now we have 3D graphics. We've got this really great dragon that morphs as you go along the level, and you develop different powers and shooting ice particles at another enemy in this beautiful 3D landscape.
How many landscapes do you have?
We have 5 landscapes in the game so far, just like really beautiful, and over 100 different skies. Every time you play the game, it's a different sky. So it's advanced quite a bit, and there's a lot of iterations in between what I've shown, but you have to be willing to put out Brainwing. You know, you have to be willing to put just a hand-drawn in paint glider on top of a background that you find off the internet and just have them slide across the screen over and over and over again. Because that's where it has to start and where you have to start showing it to people. We showed each of these iterations to people and got feedback from them, and that's what informed each level of development. The reason why, the big difference in the game, you might have noticed, is that it started with a glider and it became a dragon. Does anybody want to guess why we did that? So I don't know, I guess it didn't show it in the other one, but in the other game, you were a glider and you had dragons coming at you and you had to shoot certain dragons and you had to ignore other dragons in a cognitive training task, a go, no-go task. And now you're breathing fire at dragons. What's the big difference between a glider shooting dragons and a dragon breathing fire at dragons?
One's cooler than the other.
Maybe. Anybody else? Violence. It's not violence, according to parents and schools, if it's a dragon breathing fire at other dragons. But when we had a glider that was shooting laser beams at dragons, that became violent. And schools and parents had a lot of concerns about that. And so that's kind of feedback that we would have never come up with in our office talking about it. We would have never thought, we had no blood. You hit the dragon and it like turned upside down and like falls off the screen. We didn't think that it would be a big deal, but it was. And as soon as we changed it to a dragon, nobody cared because dragons can like kill dragons and everybody's cool with that. So that's gotten us to this point, and I said briefly that we haven't been in hardware yet, but now we're getting into hardware. We realized, again, through a lot of user testing, that people really hate the headset we use. They despise it. We launched our product 2 months ago and have gotten a lot of attention and a lot of customers, and yeah, you can start with that one. And they really hate the headset. Now, it looks cool, and I won't even show it to you because it's a cool looking headset. But it doesn't work very well. There's this weird ear clip that has to, or earpiece that has to go against this bone behind the ear. And you have to kind of bend it into place, and then you have to kind of arrange these other sensors that are kind of like in weird spots, and you have to touch the skin at the same point. And so all our customers, are calling us at all hours of the night, literally texting me, sending messages through our live chat saying it doesn't work, it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Now, we know through a year of testing that it actually works very well and it's pretty easy to get set up, but our customers can't figure it out, which means that we actually have a problem. That's another big thing that you miss out on, is that we had tested with users. We had brought this to kids. We had this in use in psychiatrist's office, but you don't really know what you don't know. And what we didn't know in this situation was that when you send it to somebody across the country and they just get in a box and they're opening it and they're completely on their own, it's kind of difficult to set up. If you've never experienced an EEG device before and you expect it to work like an iPhone where you turn it on and it just works, and you're not used to adjusting some sensors and getting some things working, then it became a really frustrating process for people. So we knew that we couldn't stick with our existing headsets that were on the market if we really wanted to be successful long term. And so we know we had to, you could stay on that one actually. Okay. So we had to develop our own headset and come up with a new idea. And the first inspiration was one of Tatiana's headbands, which I saw on the table one day. And I realized that it was perfect for an EEG device. It fit so easily. There's no adjustments. The headbands most of the time are not adjustable. You just kind of put them on your head, and they stick, and they get contact in the areas that we need contact, and they work perfectly. And so that became the inspiration for our headset, is to model it after headbands. So we started off, great company called Shapeways. Anybody heard of Shapeways? They're really easy to do online 3D printing. So you make up a model, you send it to Shapeways, 2 weeks later, you get a model. You get a physical model, which you 3D printed model. So if you want to go to, this is a couple of our first Shapeways prototypes. So obviously no electronics, nothing functional in here. This is just to get a feel for it. And we had those printed out in different materials. We refined the design so you can get into the kind of the next iteration. No, the other one.
Ruin the surprise.
So this is the next iteration where we said, okay, this is a polished, this is still a render, we didn't have the electronics in here, but it's just a polished, nice looking design of what this product could actually look like with the dimensions in the right place and the sensors in the right place and everything else. And now you can go to the final one. And then we are able to take this, raise some additional funds, and go to industrial designer who's working with us on a complete redesign and how is it actually going to look. And this is the first concept. This is going to be so old, it's going to look as old as the other ones when we're done with this process, because it's going to look nothing like this. There's so many things that are changing about this. The ears are different, everything's about it different. So this story doesn't have an ending yet, but it just kind of gives you an idea of what we're doing right now in terms of iterating the design over and over again based on feedback. And what we're doing and what our designers are doing as they work with us is we have in their office every single EEG headset that's ever been made. So about 6 different consumer EEG headsets. And all day long, they put them on and they write down what's wrong with these, what can be better. And so I think that's kind of a great example of like, use your competitors to prototype. Think of your competitors as the prototype, and if you want to just start there and say, okay, put this on, try this website out, try this app out, what's wrong with it? What's broken? How would you make it better? What don't you like? And that's how we're starting with this process, and that's kind of how we've gotten to this point, is we've looked at all the EEG headsets that have come out and said, how do we avoid the mistakes that predecessors made and make something that's the best one?
There's a great book called Steal Like an Artist. And the fundamental premise is that all art is stolen from somebody else, but then it's reinterpreted and re-expressed in a different way, and then that becomes unique. And when you're prototyping, you really want to look for things that are analogies. So that helps in a couple of ways. One is that it helps you communicate what the important features of it are. The second thing is it really helps you explain it to other people. So like I was joking here about, Uber for exercise. Okay, what is Uber? Fundamentally, it's people who have their contract for hire people who have different routes that they run and places that they go. Now that's a mapping thing, and it's also time sensitive, but for the exercise idea, it really is Uber for exercise. I need somebody, I need them at 7 in the morning, and I need them on East Campus, not West Campus. So you can start to say, this is what I need, and if I can identify somebody, and then click on that and see what their profile and their background is, and if you screen them all to make sure that they're bonded and whatever else you have to do and athletically certified, then people get it. People get by the analogy. The analogy helps explain your idea. And so as you go through the prototyping process, you'll come up with different ways that people will toss things out and say, oh, that's kind of like this, or oh, that's a lot like what Apple does, or that's like this. Keep those in the back of your mind because it's a great way to explain what you have. Tatiana used all of the existing drinks that were out there. It's healthy Red Bull. Okay, people get what Red Bull is, but this is healthy, all natural, no artificial ingredients, but they understand exactly what the category is. So when you're prototyping, it helps you to think about other models and then figure out how you can build from that. Questions?
So I would like to ask Tatiana. So your product is different from Webco. So how can you effectively deliver that message to have the users to buy it, taste it?
Yeah, so something that was happening when I was launching cans into Whole Foods was something called the clean label movement, which is basically means that people were looking at the ingredients of what they were consuming more than ever before. Today, 50% of consumers in a grocery store read the ingredients of the packaged product they're consuming. This was not the case 5 years ago. So I felt that if I could get the consumer just hold the product in their hand, I knew they'd read the ingredients then. Game over. We have the best ingredient label of any energy drink in the country right now. Literally, juices and tea. You don't get more natural, you don't get higher quality products than that. So my challenge was, how do I get somebody to put this in their hand? And it really was looking at how do I bring that message across? Typically, natural and healthy products have a white background or a silver background or something very light and pastel. Well, this wasn't a healthy energy drink. It's an energy drink that happens to be healthy and happens to be the healthiest energy drink in the market. It's an energy drink for non-energy drink consumers. I wanted it to exude active lifestyles. I wanted it to appeal to athletes. So I thought about my favorite athletic brand, Under Armour. Well, they're athletic, they exude this kind of energy, and they have a very dark background. I think that might be mine. So I grabbed a couple of the labels from Under Armour stuff, and I looked at it, and it had black background or dark gray background. Jake's Under Armour stuff had like bright logos, bright colors, my brother's Christmas presents. Under Armour again, bright colors, dark background. And I said, with Jake's help, we said, well, why don't we try that as opposed to the light background? Stuck some stuff on the shelf to see if it kind of did the job.
Yeah, we actually
and it
took
did.
pictures of shelves at convenience stores and grocery stores and like instantly said, okay, really quickly, put it in front of you, what stands out? And each time, there's a product on that shelf that stands out to you. And then we go back and say, okay, why is that product standing out? And that was a really great way to like model the design of the Monte can, was
Yeah.
try to take those things that really stand out about other products on the shelf.
We'd go into Whole Foods before we were on Whole Foods shelf and stick the can on the shelf and take a step back and get like 50 different cans on there and take a picture. And then do the same thing in a convenience store, because I knew I didn't want my competition to always just be Whole Foods competitors. I also wanted Red Bull and Monster, which are not sold at Whole Foods. So we would do it across different channels and test different packaging looks until we figured out that this was really the look that we were going for. In terms of natural, maybe if you see this from a distance, it doesn't look that natural, but it is a very simple design, and simple designs in consumer packaged goods, food products today typically mean that the ingredients are also simple, that they're real foods. And again, it was get it in the person's hand. Yeah.
Yeah, so I would imagine like tastes can be a very personal matter. So in your prototyping process, were you looking to get as many people to like your product as possible, or were you looking to get that core, like people who really love it?
That was a really tricky one. The first test I ever did was to figure out what's the ideal amount of sweetness in a product. So I did different concentrations of sugar, and I just used sugar. I didn't use juices or anything initially. And I found that 7 grams was ideal. And my test group, I was on campus, so my test group were InCube students and a couple mentors that we had that came in. They're probably pretty close to the demographic. They're educated. They're maybe not quite as health conscious as I would have liked, but the demographic I'm shooting for isn't all health conscious. Subsequent ones in offices, again, it's pretty educated people working in the offices that I was targeting. It's very interesting that you bring that up, because the carbonated, non-carbonated test, the non-carbonated people were typically in this one office that had like a back room and a front room. The front room was all developers and very educated people. The back room were more blue collar. They were doing manual labor type of work. The back room liked the non-carbonated more because it was more similar to something that they'd grown up drinking, which was sweet tea. The front room liked more that it was more like a LaCroix water, which is kind of a little yuppity, right? Just based on the fact that the front room people were willing to drink 5 times more of the carbonated stuff, I said, that's the market I'm going with. I also need people to pay between $2 and $3 for every can so that I can make a profit off of it on a small scale. So ideally you want to target people that are in your customer base or the customer base you'd like to attract. Sometimes you don't really have that luxury and you have to get as close as you can. So using your existing customers is pretty important. Jake, you want to pick people? Kurt? Katya?
So if cans were unattractive and they're like you said, those beer kegs were sketchy, how did you get people to like look at them and convince them to buy them, and why did they want to talk to you, and then why did they want to buy them again if they're
So the kegs I would sell to offices. So I'd go in there and I'd talk to the CEO, the founder. Oh, the silver cans or the kegs?
Yes, with silver cans.
all of them, because you said all of them looked kind of unattractive.
Yeah, okay, so the kegs, those were only sold in offices. I talked to the CEOs, most of them were in the area, a lot of them were Dukies. They'd be like, yeah, I'll help this little girl who's at Duke, get her business off the ground. Then I was delivering all the kegs in my 2-door Toyota Yaris, so I made a point, every time I went in to deliver, which was usually once a week, I would talk about my story and talk about the product and talk about how it was different. And people were willing to try it, and eventually they liked it, and they're like, okay, I trust Tatiana, even though it looks sketchy, I don't think she's gonna do anything like gross or anything with the product. With the silver cans, I think I just got lucky. I started doing demos in Whole Foods. got it into the employees' hands, told them again the story, and inspired them to try the product and trust that what I was putting in there was maybe not as sketchy as what the packaging looked like. And that got us to a point where we were far enough along where we could start iterating on the packaging and make it less and less sketchy.
But it's slow. It's not like these things happen where 10,000 people bought the sketchy can. I mean, a couple hundred people bought the sketchy can, and then you get a slightly less sketchy can, and then a couple hundred more people buy it. And this is over a process of years. So you have to deal with the fact that in the early days,
you're embarrassed by your own product.
You're slightly embarrassed by your own product.
There are things about this product that I'm still not happy with. Things that are changing for the future production runs, because
you just have to think of it all as an iteration. It's just something you're going to fix in the future.
You have to be willing to show this to customers and investors.
Yeah, and there's a section on the framework that is called allies. And that's where you list, okay, who are all the people that can help me out? Who can take this, and what assumptions do I want them to answer for me? So in Tatiana's case, it was, okay, I want to go to these CEOs who are Duke alums, who will be my allies and help me out. And the assumptions I want to test are about the product, about the packaging, et cetera, et cetera. And so every time you go back and you look at another set of allies, because went from offices to into an entirely different channel of distribution. So you got to have a different set of allies. But it's an iterative process that you go through.
Yeah.
How'd you in the Whole Foods?
Knocked on the door, talked to customer service, asked for their local buyer, and sat down to meet with him.
I mean, just like Whole Foods in Durham?
Literally, Whole Foods in Durham, walked in. I'd read that the local buyer is the person that makes local purchasing decisions on a one store at a time basis. Talked to customer service, got his name, reached out to him, got a meeting. Like 3 weeks later, he selected another buyer for the grocery and the dairy department because he wasn't sure where my product fit in. Gave me the paperwork to fill out. They said yes. 6 months later, paperwork actually got through regionals, and they were allowed to place a purchase order. From one store, then I was already in the system for the Southeast, and I was able to knock on the door of 5 more stores, and then, it's literally you're knocking on doors. Yeah.
Yeah, so when you brought this product into the market, do you need to deal with FDA, especially when you change the recipe?
Yeah, so the FDA has kind of 2 branches underneath it for food products, the Department of Health and the Department of Agriculture. Our product fits more under the Department of Agriculture. Depending on how much you're producing impacts how specific they are about their demands on the product. So for us, they just inspect the facility and say, is this a clean place? Are you following general good manufacturing practices? Are you doing things that limit any possibility of anything bad getting in there? Besides that, they're really relying on the US being a capitalist society, and if people are getting sick from your product, then the government is going to shut you down. If people don't like your product or you're not doing a good job keeping it consistent, then the market is going to regulate that. Yeah.
How has your team evolved over time?
Yeah, so I tried to get a co-founder as an undergrad. It was really difficult to find somebody that was willing to put in the hours that I was. So finally I decided I'm just going to work my butt off and get it to a point where I'm able to attract people that I want, the caliber of people that I want on my team. That didn't happen for 2 years. So thankfully I had Jake to help me when I got big orders and I had 100 cans to label or 200 cans to label. But I didn't hire my first employee until a year ago. We're now 4 people and hiring 4 more over the next, ideally I'd hire them all next week or today, but it takes time to find the right candidates. Yeah.
So when you approached Whole Foods, the buyer, what kind of inputs did you get from them?
So something they were really interested in was they didn't have any local products that were energy drinks or very few beverages in the cooler that were locally made. Whole Foods is very interested in small batch, locally produced products. They didn't have anything in the category that I was selling. So for them it was, does it make sense for our product? Is it free of all of the 3-page list of ingredients that we don't allow to be sold here? And does it kind of fit with where Whole Foods portfolio of products is moving towards? energy drinks sell pretty well, and it fit what they were looking for. So in that sense, I was kind of lucky that I chose a sector that didn't have a lot of local competition to get started. If you're trying to make like a hot sauce or a salsa, good luck getting it into Whole Foods, because probably ain't happening.
So as Duke students are connected to the university, you have an obligation to go to Whole Foods and tell the store manager, I want my Mati. All right, I want it. And no, by the way, buy it while you're there. For all of you who stuck around, there's one more handout that I wanted to just share with you guys. I had fun with this because when I wrote the book, like I said, it took 30 years to write it, but anytime you're in a corporate organization, the first thing they say is no. And if you got an idea, no. And so I've labeled those the antibodies that exist in the organization. Something new comes in, and the antibody is going to attack it and kill it. All right? So I thought that that was a little bit too harsh, so I called it just the devil's advocate. And what I did was I had the illustrator in the book draw a devil, and then a little bubble that says, this is what the devil's advocate will ask you at this point in your process. And what I gave you is, how do you respond to the devil's advocate? How do you tell them what you did to overcome their objection, and then what your mantra should be? And ask them, do you really object to me going out and talking to consumers and making sure that this is what they like? Or are you concerned about making so much money on the product? What exactly is your concern? Because I know when you're starting out, it's really hard to figure out how to answer those objections. And you're worried about, what do I say, and what are they going to ask me? Well, these are the questions that they're probably going to ask you, and these are good ways to respond. We've prototyped this with a number of different people. This is our 5th iteration, so we know that we've got it as close to optimized as we can at this point. Okay, good. So I can't really object to well, what exactly did you do? Well, Tatiana has story after story. We matched them up in the aisle. We took pictures. We compared. We worked with our agency, and we found that this is what pops. And the rationale is because if it pops, they'll put it in their hand, they'll look at the ingredients, and the story is told. Do you have any problems with that? No. Okay, next question. So it's all about handling that objection so that you can keep everything moving forward. You'll always hear people tell you that you can't do it. You'll always hear people tell you that you're crazy. You'll always hear people tell you that you're wasting your time. If those questions and those concerns give you pause, then go work for the man. But if you believe that you have something that's going to make the world better because it's faster, cheaper, easier, or healthier for the world, go do it. Okay? You have to have the courage of your convictions. You saw the iterations that Jake and Tatiana went through. You heard the pain that they had about rolling up things and getting labels at Kinko's and finding inspiration from a hair doobie-dobby. That's what I tell my daughter it is. It's a hair doobie-dobby. Because as a bald guy, what do I know? But you have to have that courage, okay? And I hope that tonight you saw a couple of different techniques and you experimented a little bit about how to build that courage. You build it by doing. You build your courage by doing it again, and doing it again. And only through that perseverance will you become successful. There's no entrepreneur who ever made it big in 90 days. But in 90 days, you can come up with a prototype to figure out what's wrong with it and where do we go from here. So thank you all for coming. I hope you enjoyed it. If you want to reach me, my email is Kurt, K-U-R-T, at msq.co. And Tatiana and Jake, I think they were on I don't know if their emails were there or not.
It's easy. It's Tatiana at monteenergy.com, and I'm Jake at neuro.plus.
So that's the other thing, is when you're an entrepreneur, you can only use your first name. See? You don't have to worry about putting dashes and dots in it. So thank you all for coming. We hope you enjoyed it, and good luck. Good luck to all of you.